Level 1. Cadet at the Coast Guard Academy. You're 18 years old, standing on the grounds of the United States Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut, while your old life disappears into a cardboard box and a duffel bag. This civilian version of you lasts about another 10 minutes. Then, the shouting starts. Not movie shouting. Efficient shouting. The kind designed to make 100 new cadets move like one machine before any of you have figured out where the dining hall is. Swab summer is where they teach you that stress can be organized. You wake before sunrise. You make your rack so tightly it looks less like a bed and more like an accusation. You run everywhere. You square corners. You learn rates, ranks, chain of command, and the exact tone of voice upper-class cadets use when they want to remind you that comfort is no longer part of the schedule. You thought this would be about ships. It is, eventually. First, it's about discipline, then precision, then endurance, then chemistry, navigation, calculus, engineering, and enough memorization to make your brain feel like federal property. The academy sits above the Thames River, and every time you catch a glimpse of water between classes, you remember why you came. The Coast Guard does everything. Search and rescue, law enforcement, migrant interdiction, ice operations, aids to navigation, marine safety, environmental protection. It isn't one mission, it's all of them, often before lunch. By your second year, you stop feeling like you're pretending. You know how to wear the uniform without checking yourself every 10 seconds. You know how to stand watch. You know how to handle a small boat without overcorrecting every turn. During summer training, you finally get underway for real. Salt air, diesel exhaust, radio chatter, and that first moment when the shoreline drops away and the service stops being theory. By the time you're a first-class cadet, younger cadets are looking at you the way you used to look at everyone above you. You hate how much you understand the yelling now. Leadership at the academy is never abstract. It's whether the person behind you makes it through the week because you set the standard high and didn't leave him alone with it. Graduation arrives all at once. 4 years reduced to a parade field, a commission, a salute, and a gold bar on your collar. Yesterday, you were getting corrected for the angle of your chin. Today, you're an officer in the United States Coast Guard, which is exciting right up until you realize they're about to hand you actual responsibility. Rank 1, Ensign. You're 22 and you're officially an officer, United States Coast Guard. You're earning about $85,000 a year in total compensation once base pay, housing allowance, and subsistence are counted. Your first unit is a cutter out of Alameda, a white hull, a red racing stripe, and a command that immediately makes one thing clear. Nobody cares how well you did at the academy if you can't qualify underway. As an ensign, your life is checklists, signatures, and trying not to look lost on the bridge at 2 o'clock in the morning. You're a division officer now, which sounds impressive until you realize it means a chief petty officer with 17 years in service is about to patiently explain why your first plan is terrible. That chief saves you repeatedly, not dramatically, professionally. He teaches you how to run maintenance meetings without wasting everyone's time. He teaches you that sailors can smell uncertainty before you've finished a sentence. He teaches you the sacred Coast Guard art of making a broken system function with less money, fewer people, and worse weather than anyone thought reasonable. You qualify as officer of the deck underway, and that qualification changes everything. The bridge gets quieter around you. Not physically, internally. You stop hearing every alarm as a personal accusation. You start seeing the pattern. Traffic, weather, radar contacts, course changes, engine status, radio calls. At first it was noise. Now it's a picture. Then your first real case happens. A mayday from a fishing vessel taking on water 30 miles offshore. Suddenly, every simulator run, every nav brief, every emergency procedure becomes real and very fast. You launch the small boat, coordinate with the helicopter, and watch men come aboard your cutter soaked, shaken, and alive because your crew did exactly what they trained to do. That night, after the paperwork and debrief and coffee gone cold in a stained mug, you understand the emotional trick of this service. Half the country forgets the Coast Guard exists right up until the worst day of somebody's life. Then, you're the only thing that matters. Rank 2, Lieutenant Junior Grade. You're 24 years old, and you've got a little sea time now, which is dangerous because confidence arrives just before competence feels complete. As a lieutenant junior grade, you're still junior enough to be corrected, and senior enough to be responsible when correction comes too late. You're making roughly $98,000 a year in total compensation. You rotate to a sector command center in Miami. The pace is relentless. Search and rescue calls, law enforcement coordination, weather tracking, overdue boaters, medical evacuations. The phones don't ring because something went well. You're no longer standing one watch on one ship. You're seeing the whole map. A distressed beacon off the Keys, a disabled freighter in the shipping channel, a migrant vessel packed beyond reason, a pollution report near a marina. The Coast Guard is one of the only services where your day can move from saving a kayaker to coordinating with federal law enforcement to tracking a hurricane with no transition period at all. At this rank, you start discovering that leadership often means sounding calmer than you feel. A father reports his son missing on a paddleboard just before sunset. You launch assets, assign search patterns, update the command duty officer, and keep your voice steady while the window for a good outcome narrows by the minute. 4 hours later, a helicopter crew spots him clinging to a marker pile. Everyone in the command center exhales at once, then gets back to work because another call is already waiting. You go home after midnight and realize your dinner is still in the office fridge. You stop being surprised by that too. Rank 3. Lieutenant. This is where people stop treating you like a promising junior officer and start expecting you to perform like one. You're 27 years old and your total annual compensation is around $115,000. As a lieutenant, you take command of a fast response cutter in Florida. Now your name is on the watch bill, on the fitness reports, on the mishap messages if something goes wrong, and on every decision that has to be made before dawn with incomplete information. Command at sea is smaller than people imagine and heavier than they expect. You've got a crew young enough to be fearless and smart enough to be dangerous if badly led. You're running counter-narcotics patrols, migrant interdiction missions, and search and rescue cases in water that can go from postcard blue to violent gray in an hour. One week you intercept a go-fast boat loaded with cocaine. The next week you tow a disabled family cruiser with 2 scared kids and a golden retriever named Max. Same service, same cutter, same 24-hour period if your luck is weird enough. Your executive petty officer knows every valve, every maintenance delay, every sailor with a problem at home. Your engineer can hear trouble in a diesel engine before the gauges show it. You learn the command lesson every good officer eventually learns. The crew doesn't need you to be the smartest person on board. They need you to make decisions, own them, and trust the professionals under you. When a storm line moves in during a night transit and visibility collapses, you stay on the bridge for 6 straight hours. You don't leave because the sea doesn't care about your sleep debt. By sunrise, your cutter's through it, your crew's safe, and you've aged what feels like 5 years since dinner. Rank 4. Lieutenant Commander. Now you're department head level, and your world gets broader and more political. You report to a major cutter as operations officer. The ship is larger, the mission set wider, and the consequences of disorganization much more expensive. You're 32 years old and earning about $135,000 a year in total compensation. You plan patrols that involve aviation detachments, boarding teams, intelligence updates, and enough fuel calculations to make you deeply respectful of logistics. The romantic image of command at sea gives way to the more accurate image of 15 overlapping spreadsheets and a radio call that ruins all of them. You brief the captain every morning. He asks 3 questions that reveal exactly where your plan is weak. It's infuriating and educational in equal measure. This is also the rank where younger officers start coming to you for advice they pretend is hypothetical. How do I handle a chief who openly disagrees with me? What do I do when one of my people is excellent at the mission and terrible at everything else? How do I tell my spouse I'm getting underway again after we just got home? You answer directly because somebody once did that for you. During a major drug interdiction patrol in the Eastern Pacific, your cutter chases a suspect vessel through darkness and heavy seas. Boarding teams launch at first light, bales stack on deck, cameras come out. Reports go up the chain. It becomes a success story in a briefing somewhere in Washington. What the briefing doesn't show is the exhaustion, the maintenance casualties, the sleep-deprived boatswain's mate holding a line in spray so cold it feels sharp. At this rank, you understand the service runs on two fuels, diesel and trust. Rank 5. Commander. You've made commander, and now you command a major cutter. This is no longer a ship. It's an institution with a crew, an air detachment, complex mission tasking, and a budget that disappears faster than anyone admits. You're 37 years old, and your total compensation is around $160,000. You set the tone for everything. If you're sharp, standards rise. If you're lazy, everyone knows by the second week. If you panic, the whole command gets smaller inside itself. Your patrols are months long now. The distances are bigger. The oceans feel less forgiving. You're responsible for law enforcement operations in one moment and humanitarian rescue the next. In the Pacific, your crew interdicts smugglers. In the Caribbean, you recover desperate migrants from overloaded boats. In the Arctic, you support national presence in waters that punish mistakes immediately. You spend less time doing and more time deciding. That sounds easier until you realize decisions are the one thing nobody can take off your plate. You can delegate a report. You can't delegate command. A junior officer grounds a small boat during a difficult nighttime approach. Nobody's killed. Damage is limited. The paperwork is brutal. He walks into your cabin expecting the end of his career. Instead, you debrief every mistake, hold him accountable, and keep him in the fight because leadership isn't just punishment. It's judgment. You start to understand what senior officers mean when they talk about stewardship. The crew is not yours to use up. The mission is not yours to dramatize. You are holding both in trust for the service. Rank 6. Captain. As a captain, you move ashore into sector command. Now you're responsible for ports, waterways, coastal security, marine inspections, pollution response, and enough interagency coordination to make you feel like the mayor of emergencies. You're 44 years old and earning roughly $190,000 a year in total compensation. You work with the Navy, local police, state agencies, Customs and Border Protection, FEMA, harbor pilots, shipping companies, and people in suits who only remember your phone number during hurricanes. A tanker collision in your zone means environmental response, vessel traffic management, media pressure, and elected officials demanding answers before the oil sheen has finished spreading. A major storm means pre-positioning assets, evacuation coordination, port conditions, and making sure the families of your own people are squared away while those same people get sent straight into the chaos. This rank is less dramatic day to day and more consequential by the month. You don't board the vessel. You decide how the response works. You don't fly the helicopter. You make sure the aircraft, crews, and command relationships are ready before the weather hits. You attend meetings where everyone uses the word resilience too much. Then a real crisis arrives, and suddenly plain language returns. What do we have? What do we need? Who's in trouble? What moves now? You miss being underway. You also understand why the service needs officers who can think at this scale. The Coast Guard isn't just a fleet, it's a network of stations, sectors, air stations, cutters, commands, and people trying to keep the maritime system from sliding into chaos. Rank 7. Rear Admiral, lower half. 1 star. The first flag rank. Your presence in a room changes the dynamic before you even say a word. You're now responsible for a district-level portfolio, and your world becomes regions, priorities, and resource fights. You're 48 years old and making around $210,000 a year in total compensation. You visit stations in Alaska where winter feels like a living thing. You visit small boat crews in the Gulf who launch into seas sensible people avoid. You sit in congressional briefings explaining why cutters older than their crews still need replacement and why missions keep expanding whether budgets do or not. At this level, there are no small issues, only local ones that eventually become national if ignored long enough. A failing pier, a staffing gap, a pattern of burnout at an air station, a shortage of maintenance money. Every one of them looks administrative right up until it becomes operational. You learn the strange loneliness of flag rank. People are more careful around you now. Jokes stop half a second earlier. Bad news arrives polished. You spend real effort making it safe for people to tell you the truth. When a major hurricane tears through your district, you coordinate response across multiple states. Air crews pluck survivors from rooftops. Boat crews move through debris-choked streets that used to be neighborhoods. Public affairs calls it a historic operation. For you, it's 100 decisions an hour, and the knowledge that someone out there is still waiting for help. Rank 8. Rear Admiral. You have 2 stars now, more scope, and less direct contact with the deck plates. You oversee entire mission areas and shape policy that reaches from headquarters to the smallest station. You're 51 years old and earning roughly $220,000 a year. This is where the service becomes less about one crisis and more about the architecture behind all of them. Procurement, readiness, personnel, future force design. You argue for new cutters, better aviation support, stronger cyber capability, smarter recruiting, and housing that doesn't make young families question their life choices. You sign off on plans that will matter 10 years from now. That's the hardest shift for a career officer. The Sea trained you to react fast. Senior leadership requires patience measured in fiscal years. Still, the field never stays far away. A major search and rescue case captures national attention. A passenger vessel catches fire offshore. A marine casualty board starts forming before the smoke is gone. You know exactly what those crews are living through because, at some point, years ago, you were the tired officer on the bridge hoping the training held. Rank 9, Vice Admiral, 3 stars. You are now one of the handful of people shaping what the Coast Guard becomes, not just what it does this week. You're managing enormous parts of the institution. Strategy, operations, people, acquisition, all of it braided together. You're 54 years old, and your total compensation is about $230,000. You sit across from cabinet officials, combatant commanders, members of Congress, and industry leaders. Everyone wants more from the service, more patrols, more presence, more interdictions, more icebreaking, more cyber defense, more resilience. More with less has been the Coast Guard's love language for generations, but now you're the one expected to make that arithmetic work. You also carry the internal burden: promotions, assignments, misconduct cases, command screening. The service's values look simple engraved on a wall. They get complicated when they have to be enforced by real human beings with strong records and serious failures. You fight for the service because if you don't, nobody else can do it properly. The Coast Guard is too military for some rooms, too civilian for others, too small to dominate the conversation, and too essential to be ignored when everything starts breaking at once. Rank 10. Admiral, you are the Commandant of the United States Coast Guard. 4 stars, highest rank in the service. Every mission, every district, every cutter, every station, every aircraft, every enlisted member, cadet, warrant officer, and commissioned officer ultimately connects to your desk. You're 57 years old, and your annual compensation is around $250,000. From the outside, this looks like prestige. From the inside, it feels like stewardship on a national scale. You testify before Congress. You advise the president. You shape maritime strategy for a country with thousands of miles of coastline, massive inland waterways, global economic interests, and a talent for noticing the ocean only when something goes wrong on it. A container ship collision shuts down a major port. A hurricane bears down on the Gulf. Illegal fishing pressures U.S. waters. Arctic competition grows. Drug routes shift. Migration surges. Cyber threats target maritime infrastructure. The Coast Guard touches all of it, and so do you. And still, in quiet moments, your mind goes backward. To New London. To the first time you stood in formation as a nervous swab with a haircut you didn't choose. To the first Mayday. To the first night on the bridge when the sea looked black enough to swallow certainty. To the chief who taught you not to confuse authority with competence. To the crews who launched into impossible weather because someone had to go. That's the whole career, really. Rank changes. Responsibility expands. The paperwork gets heavier and the offices get quieter. But the purpose never changes. Somewhere out there, somebody's in trouble on the water. Somewhere else, a coastline needs protecting, a port needs securing, a spill needs containing, a law needs enforcing, a life needs saving. And after all these years, through every promotion and every command, that's still the job. The uniform got sharper, the view got higher, the mission stayed exactly where it started, out at sea with no room for hesitation.